barring mind being kind. But what on earth does it mean? What does the word bar mean to you? To bar somebody? To prevent? So I looked up the dictionary. I found out that there were 4 entries for the word to bar. One is to exclude from, to disallow. That's the first meaning. The second meaning is to prevent usage. The third is to expel. And the fourth is to secure with or as if with bars. Now, which of these 4 do you think would be applicable to our topic today? It's pity you can't see those on the screen. I'll go over them again. The first one is to exclude from, to disallow. The second is to prevent usage. The third is to expel. And the fourth is to secure with or as if with bars. The fourth one, all. How can all? Okay, let's put it this way. Barring the mind. That means you disallow the mind. You prevent the usage of the mind. You expel the mind. How can you practice kindfulness without the mind? Is it possible? No. So number 4 seems to be more relevant. You secure the mind with bar. Now those of you who have studied with me before, who have attended my retreats, will know what bar is. Who doesn't know what bar is? Hands up. You all don't know what is bar. Oh, you attended my workshop, you should know. I'll talk about bar later in the course of our talk today. To explain the first part of the topic, the subject, barring mind, being kind, it means securing the mind with bar so that one can be wisely kind. B-A-R-R, bar. Securing the mind with bar. Not bars, but bar. So the first part is securing the mind with bar so that one can be wisely kind. That's the first part. Let's go on to the second part, which is about kindfulness. What's barring the mind got to do with kindfulness? One might ask, what is kindfulness? Since kindfulness is a new word and cannot be found in the Pali scriptures, I have the liberty to define it the way I want to. So, I define it as to be mindful of the kindness of others shown towards oneself or otherwise. Number 1. The second part of kindfulness is to clearly know when and how to be kind to others, to oneself, and to the environment. Can you get it? One is to appreciate the kindness of other people, and one is to clearly know when you can be kind under certain circumstances. So here, in these 2 aspects of kindfulness, the first one involves mindfulness, to be mindful of the kindness of others. And the second one involves clearly knowing, to clearly know when and how to be kind to others, oneself, and the environment. In Pali, that's sati sampajanya, mindfulness and clear comprehension, or mindfulness and clear knowing. These are actually 2 aspects of the very fundamental teachings of the Buddha, which is wisdom and compassion. Wisdom and compassion are like the parents in the Buddha Dhamma. They guide Buddhists on how to put the Buddha Dhamma into practice. Sometimes I like to use the Taoist concept of yin and yang. And I say that in Buddhist meditation, although there is no specific reference to it in our suttas, there is still the yin and the yang element. What is the yin of Buddhist meditation and what is the yang of Buddhist meditation? Any guesses? The yin of Buddhist meditation is metta karuna, loving kindness and compassion. And the yang of Buddhist meditation is vipassana. Why do I say that? In vipassana, you try to see things in terms of ultimate reality, or rather phenomena that, impersonal phenomena that arise and pass away due to causes and conditions. It becomes very impersonal so that you can stand aloof and be detached and not get affected by things that happen to you and to others. So it's a good way of reducing suffering. It's a good way of helping you to let go. Because when you see things as impersonal, not me, not mine, not myself, it's just due to causes and conditions, then it's easier for you to let go. Nowadays, you have heard of so many calamities happening all over the world. There's a typhoon here, and there's floods there, an earthquake here and over there, and it becomes very normal, In Malay, we say, sudah biasa. You hear also, like, it doesn't make any difference to you anymore. There's another typhoon in the Philippines, another one in Taiwan, and a few hurricanes in US. So what? You hear that every day. But what if there's somebody there who's related to you? What if somebody very close to you was caught in those situations? How would you feel? When there is something that is related to you, then you suffer. When it is not related to you, so what? There's just another natural phenomena. You can just shrug it off. So that's the whole purpose of vipassana. Vipassana meditation helps you to stand aloof, be detached. But I think there's a big problem for lay people, isn't it? When you practice vipassana and you get very deep insights, then you have a problem, conflict of interests. In the world, you have all your family relationships, your worldly obligations, to your parents, to your spouse, to your children, to your colleagues. How can you let go? And then when you try to be too aloof, people say you're weird. Since you became a Buddhist, this person has become so weird. Doesn't go window shopping anymore, doesn't buy so much things anymore. And the husband will even get a bit concerned. Hey, how come my wife is not getting any more adornments, no more going after cosmetics and all these things? In fact, there was one man in Taipei. The man was not a very religious person. And the wife came to join us, and then we taught her meditation, especially daily life meditation, not just going on retreat. And she really practiced daily life meditation, watching her mind throughout the whole day. And she found that as she did that, she became more and more antisocial. Wants to stay alone with herself rather than mix with people, or wanting to watch TV or going out for shows. Become more and more introverted rather than extroverted. And then doesn't like to go window shopping anymore, doesn't want to go touring and all that. That really made her husband very concerned. And the husband forbade her from coming to our temple. What happens if she becomes a nun? Who's going to take care of my children? And who's going to take care of me? So that's why in the suttas, this is always balanced with metta karuna. The Buddha not only encouraged the monks and nuns to meditate, to be free from suffering, to be detached, to be aloof, to be disenchanted with the world, but he also told them to practice metta, loving kindness, and the 4 Brahma Viharas. Now this is a bit different. When you practice loving kindness and karuna, for example, compassion, you're not talking in terms of impersonal phenomena and causes and conditions. You're talking about beings, living beings, people, animals, people who are suffering. And so this brings you back to the world. When you're doing vipassana, your head might be up in the clouds. But when you're doing metta and karuna, you're back on earth. And that's what I call balancing the yin and yang of Buddhist meditation. Not just concentrate on vipassana and forget about metta karuna or the other Brahma Viharas. We have to balance the two. So, mindfulness has been associated with vipassana. But actually it's very strange, when you study the suttas, there's no direct relation between vipassana and mindfulness. Nothing stated in the sutta explicitly. Even in the Satipatthana Sutta, the word vipassana is not there. Nor is the word samatha. And where there is mention of samatha and vipassana, the word mindfulness is not there either. Anyway, mindfulness is connected somehow with wisdom. And kindness, of course, is connected with compassion and loving kindness. So when we say, barring mind being kind, kindness for a change, we are talking about actually applying these two, balancing the yin and yang of Buddhist practice. Now let's come back to the definition of kindfulness that I gave just now. Can you remember? The first one is to be mindful of the kindness that others show towards yourself or to others or to the environment. And the second is to be clearly aware or to clearly know when and how to practice kindness. So here you see the word mindful in the first definition, and you see the word clearly knowing in the second definition. And as I said, these in Pali we have this word sati sambhajanya, mindfulness and clear knowing. So in order to practice kindfulness, you must practice mindfulness and clear knowing too. But what is mindfulness? Mindfulness is becoming so popular these days throughout the whole world. And recently, someone sent me some news saying that in UK, I think in the political arena, they have declared this year to be a year of mindfulness. All political parties, whether they are the opposition or the government, they all agree that mindfulness is very important. Have you heard that mindfulness is all about being in the present, in the here and now? How many people here say that mindfulness is being in the present, in the here and now? Hands up. How many people say no? Hands up. How many people say don't know? Hands up. A lot of people are sitting on the fence. They don't say there is present moment awareness, nor they say no, they don't say they don't know. So what are they? Actually, mindfulness is an English translation of the Pali word sati. The verb of the word sati is sarati, which means to remember. In the whole of the Pali canon, there's no other word for to remember other than sarati. Sarati means to remember. Sati means remembrance. When you remember something, it's of the past, isn't it? So, when you say that mindfulness is present moment awareness, does it make sense? It doesn't make sense. In fact, when you look at the Pali scriptures and they talk about vipassana meditation, or when they talk about viewing the six senses or the five aggregates, particularly in the Anatta Lakkhana Sutta, the Buddha says that therefore monks, you should regard or view the five aggregates of the past, present or future as not me, not mine, not myself, and so forth. Now the word there that they translate as present in Pali is called paccuppanna. Actually, it's a past participle. The word uppanna means has arisen. It's not present. And pacchuppanna really means just arisen. Because you cannot really be in the present. I mean, you cannot be mindful of the present. You can be in the present, but it is your five senses that are in the present. If you're not a meditator, you might not understand what I'm talking about. Your eyes see, your ears hear, your nose smells, your tongue tastes, your body feels sensations in the body. Only after you see, then you can be mindful. Seeing has occurred. Only after you hear, then you know that you have heard, that hearing has occurred. So it's actually an immediate past. But that's as close to the present as we can get. When you're angry, and you know that you're angry, is that present or past? It's immediate past, right? But the mind works so fast. Even though you know that you're angry, anger can still come immediately after that. So like going back and forth, you know you're angry, and see which one prevails, whichever one is stronger. If your mindfulness is stronger, then anger will peter away. If your anger is stronger, you'll overwhelm your mindfulness and you'll be enraged. The word mindfulness or sati is used not only in this sense, it is also used in, for example, Buddhanusati. That's recollecting the virtue of the Buddha. It's used in Ubbe Nivasanusati, recollecting past lives. These are all the work of sati. So, sati always takes a past object, whether it's a distant, far distant past object, or an intermediate past object, or an immediate past object. So, it is always taking a past object. Those of you who have attended my talks or my retreats before would know what I mean by the 4 R's of sati. Those of you who haven't heard of the 4 R's of sati, hands up. Quite a lot. The 4 R's of sati are: number 1, to remember. Okay, now you're listening to me. Okay, remember what I tell you. Tomorrow when I ask you again, what are the 4 R's? Can you remember? That will be the next R, which is to recall. Now you remember as you listen, tomorrow you recall what you heard yesterday. That's the second R. The third R of sati is to remind yourself to practice. Reminding means you are remembering an instruction that you heard before. While you are hearing it, you make a conscious attempt to remember so that when you get up, you can recall. And when you recall, you have to remind yourself to put it into practice. I'm sure that many of you do a lot of chanting and use a chanting book to chant. And many of you may have been chanting the same chant for years with the book open. If I ask you to close the book and chant, can you chant or not? You can't, because you didn't make a conscious effort to remember. So, sati is a conscious, intentional remembrance. It's not spontaneous memory. Spontaneous memory is what I call sanya. Usually it is translated as perception. When you see somebody and then you can recognize that person spontaneously, that's sanya. When you see somebody but you can't recognize him or you can't remember his name and you try to dig into your memory to see what is he called, that is sati, trying to do his work. So sati is intentional memory and sanya or perception is spontaneous memory. You have also heard of people, Buddhist scholars, Buddhologists who go to study in universities, great scholars who write theses and they can remember a lot of Buddhist teachings. So they fulfill the first R, the second R. But are they practitioners or not? Do they remind themselves to put those teachings into practice? They may fail the third R. They may get their PhD, they may be professors, very good scholars, very good Dhamma speakers, but if they don't remind themselves to practice, they don't have that third R of sati. The last R of sati is retrospect, to look back. Look back at what had just happened in your mind. That brings us to, for example, if you're angry and you look back at your mind, you know anger has arisen, right? And then you also remember, oh, one should not get angry. Anger is an unwholesome state. It has to be abandoned, and the opposite has to be cultivated, which is metta or compassion or forgiveness. Where does this come from? This also comes from memory, right? You remember because you've heard it somewhere, you've read it somewhere, and now you remind yourself to practice. So even that depends on sati. In the Abhidhamma, sati is classified as a wholesome mental state, which means to say, sati can only occur in a mind that is wholesome. If you have unwholesome mind, you cannot have sati. This is something quite questionable. Like I said just now, in the whole of the Pali scriptures, in the Pali language that is found in the Pali scriptures, there's no other word for remember apart from sati or sarati. And everybody is dependent on memory in order to survive in this world, whether you're a human being or whether you are an animal. You don't have to be a Buddhist to have memory. To have memory in order to study worldly things, to do your job, to remember your JD, to remember your tasks, your obligations. No memory, how are you going to function? There's one interesting sutta called Unaba Brahmana Sutta, or just Unaba Sutta in the Samyutta Nikaya. Unaba Brahmin approached the Buddha once and asked him, Master Gautama, now these five senses each take its own specific object, and it can only be conscious of a specific object, of a specific domain. Which means to say, the eye can only see colors, cannot hear, cannot smell, cannot taste. Likewise, the body can only feel sensations, it cannot see, cannot hear, cannot smell, cannot taste. Then who is their refuge? Who is it that is able to take all of their objects, their domains? He's a Brahmin, is he? So the Brahmins believe in the Atman, believe that apart from these senses, there is this Atman, that is the one that is experiencing and perceiving all these things. So that's why he asked who. But the Buddha did not answer who. The Buddha said it's Mano, the mind. The mind is the refuge of the five senses. The mind is the one that is able to take all of the domains of each of the five senses. That makes sense, doesn't it? You know, if you don't have the mind, you just have the five senses, how is the organism going to operate? Eyes only see, doesn't hear, doesn't smell, doesn't care what the ear hears, it doesn't care what the nose smells, it doesn't care what the body feels, it just does its own duty. Can you imagine an organization without a CEO? We just have individual departments. Finance department is doing its own thing, the sales department is doing its own thing, PR is doing its own thing. There's no one who is going to coordinate the workings of the organization. So it's the same thing. This organism depends on Mano in order to coordinate it, to coordinate all these senses together. Then he asked, then who is the refuge for Mano? For mind? And then the Buddha said, Sati. Mindfulness is the refuge for the mind. He's talking about sentient beings in general, He's not just talking about Buddhists. So from here we can see that sati is a universal quality that applies to all beings and is not necessarily just a wholesome quality. Every sentient being has to depend on the mind and memory in order to function and survive. Coming back to the 4 R's of sati, of mindfulness, the first one is, second, recall, third, fourth, okay, good, you passed already. Now you can be mindful of the kindness of others. Mindful means to recollect. You can see people, you recognize it. You can recognize that as an act of kindness, and you appreciate, and you have mudita. You say, sadhu, sadhu. The second step now is to clearly know when and how to be kind to others, to oneself, and to the environment. This is the next step. First step is just memory work. But the next step, to clearly know, means to have clear comprehension, to know the situation fully and completely. What is this? This is sampajanya. Sampajanya is able to understand the circumstances behind a particular event and connect things together so that it can make a wise decision. That's where BARR comes into play. BARR are the 4 aspects of clear knowing. These are adapted from the commentary to the Satipatthana Sutta. Whether in the Satipatthana Sutta there is one section which talks about acting with clear knowing, clear comprehension, or full awareness. So in that particular section, the commentary gave a very long explanation of what these clear awareness, or clearly knowing, or clear comprehension, sampajanya, means. And it gave 4 aspects. So I have adapted this to worldly situations, but it can also be applied to spiritual practice. The first one is B for beneficial. The second is A for appropriate. The third, R, is for relevant. And the last one, the last R, is for realistic. So, beneficial, appropriate, relevant, realistic. What you're supposed to do is sati, or mindfulness, is supposed to help you to look back at what is happening to your mind. And then sampajanya, or clear knowing, would then understand what is happening there. The job of sati is just to bring your mind to a past object. Finish. Then sampajanya carries the next step forward. Sampajanya processes the information and makes a wise decision. Okay, how does it process the information? It processes it by looking at it and see whether it's beneficial or not, whether it's appropriate or not, whether it's relevant or not, and whether it's realistic or not. It's quite a linear thing, because if you don't go through the first test, then you don't have to waste your time to go on to the next step. If you find that it's not beneficial, drop it. But if it is beneficial, then you have to go on to the next step. Is it appropriate or not? If it's not, forget it. If it is it relevant? If it's not, forget it. If it is, then is it realistic? So let me explain further, elaborate on what these 4 aspects really means. Beneficial means whether it is harmful and whether it will promote the welfare of others. If it's harmful to yourself or to others, forget it. If it will promote the welfare of yourself and others, well, it's beneficial. But of course, these are all very general principles, You have to look into your particular circumstances in order to apply. Whether it's beneficial or not depends on your value system, on your criteria for that particular situation. And sometimes it's not as clear-cut as that. It may be beneficial to you and your family, but it may not be beneficial to others. For example, if you're a businessman, of course you will benefit your company, but at the expense of somebody else. So you have to make your own balance somehow. And the second is appropriate. It may be beneficial, but it's not appropriate in the sense that it's not the right time, not the right mood to communicate to that person, and it's not the right place. For example, right now it's beneficial if I show the slides, but it's not appropriate because the program is not working properly. And then the next one is to see whether it is relevant. Is it relevant to you or not? Is it your job? Is it your responsibility? Don't try to be kepoji. If it's not yours, you don't get chop suey and then get into trouble. Sometimes we have very good intentions, but we overstep our responsibility. And particularly people who are very attached to the way of how things should be done. They want to do it their way. That's the best way. That's the most efficient way. The most optimum way. And if somebody else does it otherwise, then bosong, because you are a perfectionist, you want it to be done that way. But it may not be relevant to you. It's not your duty to go and tell that fellow off. Then you have to practice equanimity. Let go. No, not my business. And finally, this third one, relevance, the commentary talks about also continuity of practice. In worldly terms, that could mean perseverance. Don't give up easily. If it is relevant to you, if it's really beneficial, appropriate and relevant to you, don't just give up because of some little obstacles. Persevere. Try again and again and again. Particularly, pass the first 3 steps. Then the last one, realistic. Is it realistic or not? It may be beneficial, may be appropriate, may be relevant, but is it realistic? Is it workable? Is it feasible? Is it doable? That's one thing. That's one aspect of being realistic. Another aspect of being realistic is whether that is factual or not. Or is that just a suspicion? This is particularly true in your relationships with people, particularly spouses, and boyfriends and girlfriends, They tend to get suspicious over the behavior of the partner and no facts to support your suspicions. So if in such circumstances, better keep quiet first. Don't open your mouth. Because once you do that, you're asking for trouble. Because what you suspect might not be true at all. So these are the 4 aspects of clearly knowing, sampajanya, bar. So barring mind means securing the mind with the bar test. Now whatever happens to your mind, whatever feelings, perceptions or thoughts that occur in your mind, don't just believe them. Don't just follow them. Look back and process them. Put them through the bar test. Do your intentions pass the bar test? Do your feelings pass the bar test? Your perceptions pass the bar test? If they do, then proceed. If not, forget it. Now, that's easier said than done because you've got bad habits. And it's a bad habit of the mind to get lost in thoughts and to believe what you think, feel and perceive. How do you break that habit? Practice. You have to practice. You have to train the mind to develop good habits. And this is a bad habit. It's a bad habit of the human mind to always get lost in thoughts. And that's why I think mindfulness nowadays in the modern context stresses so much on the present moment. Why? There are three very important features of the six senses that I want to share with you. For many years, even before I became a monk, and I was interested in Zen meditation, I've always been wondering, what is meant by being in the present, being in the here and now, because this is such a Zen cliche in those days, in the 1970s, there was hardly any books, very few books on Zen meditation practice, and they're always stressing on being in the here and now. Famous phrase, when you're walking, just walk. When you're eating, just eat. When you're sleeping, just sleep. And in those days, before I became a monk, I was trying to practice this. What does that mean, actually? And I have no idea what it means. Until later, after I became a monk and I studied Abhidhamma. Then I realized that, I understood what they meant now. Because according to the Abhidhamma, the five senses can only take objects of the present, in the present moment. You can only see something that is happening right in front of you right now. Same with what you hear, you smell, you taste and feel with the body. A beautiful song that you heard last night, you can't hear it now with your ears, can you? You cannot. But the mind can take objects of the past, present, future, and imagination, fantasies, and beyond. For example, you ate something very nice last night. You saw some TV last night, or some news item, some video. The program is not on right now, but can you think about it? Immediately the picture arises in your mind, right? So the mind can think of the past, particularly think of the past, and worries about the future. The mind doesn't really see the future, it worries about what will happen if. That's it. That's what happens. The first feature of the six senses is that the five senses can only take objects of the present moment. Second feature of the six senses is that the sixth sense, the mind, can take objects of the past, present, future, and fantasies, imagination, and so forth. It can also take Nibbana as object. The third feature is that the mind can only take one object at one time, although at a very fantastic rate. According to the Abhidhamma, at the snap of a finger, there are billions of mind moments that have already arisen and passed away. Modern scientists have also confirmed this fact because people say that they are multitasking. So what they do is that they rig up somebody's brain with all those senses, and then they put him on a multitasking task. And they found out that actually he's not multitasking. Only certain areas of the brain are being stimulated at one time that he's doing a particular task. But because we don't have the capacity to be able to detect these fast movements of the mind, we think that we are seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, eating, thinking at the same time. But then, if the mind is kept busy with the five senses, then it has no time to get lost in thoughts of the past, present, and future. Very simple. If you're just focusing on your breath, which is in the present moment, it's happening in the present moment, or rather in the immediate past. You breathe in, you feel the sensations, and then you follow it, keep on in, out. That is being in the so-called present. And while you are busy with that, the mind doesn't have the chance to go and think of the past or the future. But it's a bad habit of the mind, it will automatically go back and think unless you train it to do otherwise. So that's why people train. They go to a quiet place and they try to breathe in, breathe out mindfully, follow their breath, and keep themselves occupied with the breath so that all these thoughts don't trouble them. That's one way. By focusing on a particular sense object, like the breath, you can calm your mind. You can disengage the mind from your habitual thinking. Other people do other things like mantras. Same. Mantra is also something that you create and then you focus on, keep it busy, and so the mind is not able to get lost in thoughts. Now, I'm sure that it's not easy for many of you to allocate 1 hour per day to do serious, formal sitting meditation. Yeah, not easy. So that's why I always try to promote everyday mindful awareness. Come back to your senses, whatever you're doing. Not necessarily just one object. Whatever you're doing, come back to your senses, being aware of what's happening to your senses without thinking about them. Be aware of your sensations in the body particularly. Right now you're listening to me, seated. You can feel the body, right? When you're talking to somebody, you're relating to somebody, come back to your body. Make the body your anchor. Body sensations. Hearing the aircon sound in the background. Feeling the cool air on your skin. Sensations on your buttocks, touching your seat. Creating that habit of coming back to your senses as often as you can throughout your daily life has got far-reaching consequences. Because our mind has this dirty habit of always getting lost in thoughts, particularly about the past and the future. If we can continually bring it back to the present moment, then imagine how much energy can be conserved. When the mind is continually being in the present moment, it doesn't mean that you cannot think. The moment it is not with the senses, then you are able to catch it. Normally you don't catch it because it's lost in thought all the time. How are you going to catch it? When you anchor yourself in the 5 senses, then the moment it's not there, then you know it's thinking. Then you apply the 4 R's, especially the last R, look back. When you look back, then you apply the bar test. Is that thought beneficial, appropriate, relevant, realistic? If not, forget it. Come back to the present moment. Simple, right? Don't have to go for a retreat. The only problem is remembering and reminding yourself to do it. It's simple. It's not that difficult, but it's just a matter of reminding yourself and having the actual interest to want to do it. But if you are really suffering, you are beset by a lot of stress, mental stress, and you really want to relax, that's a good way of relaxing. Come back to your senses. Disengage yourself from your thoughts. And every moment that you can disengage yourself from disturbing thoughts, that is a moment of peace. Each moment of peace builds up, getting longer and longer, then it will rejuvenate you and make your mind clear so that you can make wise decisions. So if you want to be kind, you can't be kind all the time to everybody, to everything. Isn't it kind to save a cockroach that is swimming in the sewage bowl? It's kind, isn't it? You would, isn't it? You would save, won't you? Or you'll just scream and run off? What happens if the whole bathroom is full of ants? What are you going to do? Then you have to apply the bar test. You want to be kind, but now is not the time, You can't do it, maybe later. So if you want to be kind, you have to look back at your mind, understand whether it is appropriate to do so or not, and what's the best way to be kind. It's almost time now. I have to collect my lunch. So just any questions before we call it off? Yeah. Different people have got different values, right? So how can we determine what is the best value to decide what is beneficial or appropriate and so forth? As I said, these are very flexible and it depends on each person's own systems of values. It's very complicated. It's not as simple as it is because sometimes, as I said, whether it's beneficial or appropriate depends on many, many contributing factors. But if you're able to keep your mind calm and clear, always trying to come back to the present moment, that will give you dynamic samadhi, what I call the mind, dynamic samadhi. The mind is composed most of the time. It's not lost in thoughts. So when you are in that sort of mode, very easily the mind can make wise decisions. But of course, the values have to be Buddhist-based values. Like I said, first one is whether it's harmful to yourself and to others, whether it's beneficial to yourself and to others. But it's not so simple, it's very complicated, and that's why it's easier to become a monk than remain as a layperson. You heard the question? You say, is non-killing an act of kindness? If so, then what are you going to do if your whole house is infested by termites? That's a very common question. Well, the Buddha told us what will happen if such things are done. It's not a commandment. You know, it's not say that thou shalt not kill. If you want to kill, can. You've got to undergo the consequences. So, do you value your money more, or do you value your welfare in the future more? So, your welfare for this present life is that if you kill all those termites, then your health is there, you can live comfortably. But what happened to you in the next life, I don't know. There's a payoff, you have to decide for yourself. That's a fact, you know. So the most important thing is like we monks, if we stay in the forest, we are all very aware of all these things. So we take preventive measures. We construct buildings in such a way that we have things that prevent termites and ants and insects from coming in. Well, after many years of experience of staying in the forest, the monks have devised things to keep those things away. But it's not foolproof. You know, you have ant caps and termite caps on your pillars, you know, to prevent them from going up, but they can still fall from the trees. Termites can fly, you know. During the breeding season, they fly and they land on your roof. You have had it. So now, the best thing is to make everything out of steel. And then you attract the lightning. So it's still suffering to be born a human, right? You can't run away. Oh, what is it that gives sustenance to the mind? Food to the mind. If I'm not mistaken, is sense experience. Phassa. Phassa is the food for vijnana. It is because of sense experience, the mind is there, because the mind craves after sense experience. 6 senses, the objects of the senses. The 6 sense experiences that give rise to pleasant feeling. That is when the whole paticca samuppada starts. Due to the 6 senses, then you have sense experience. Due to the sense experience, then you have feeling. Due to feeling, you have craving. Due to craving, then you have clinging. Due to clinging, then you have becoming. So that's how the whole cycle goes on. I think that's enough for today.